Hi BookTube, I'm back today with a video about how to develop your critical reading skills. And I think these are very important skills to have at any level. You could just be like a beginner reader, getting into this stuff, or you could be, in university and looking to further develop those skills. So these are just some points of how I feel I've developed my critical reading skills, so I'm passing them along. Okay, first of all, I want to make a very important point, which I think a lot of people make this mistake, and thinking that they have to remember everything. So I think you should know what information you can or should retain, and what is okay for you to forget and look it up later. Okay? So this is very important. Some people try to remember everything, but it's not necessary, so don't stress yourself out if you forget some fact that you can always look up later. I mean, even Einstein said there's no point in committing something to memory if you can just look it up in a book. And that was before the internet, and we can look up a whole lot more now with the internet. So when I talk about critical reading skills, I'm not talking about being able to quote verbatim from the book. If you're looking for a quote, go to the book and look it up. You don't have to remember it. If you forget a character's name, like I'm horrible with names, characters' names, real people's names, all that stuff, so I'd rather just look that up. Those kind of things, you can always look them up later, so don't worry about them. Worry more about using that brain power to analyze things, to make connections, and for other critical thinking skills. So names of characters, dates of events, even if it's like a real historical novel, like, do I know the exact date that World War II ended? No. I can always look that up though, right? I know, that the events during World War II, exactly when they happened? No, but I can tell you how they affected people, and I think that's more in line with critical thinking than knowing the exact dates. Even some plot points are easy to look up. If you go on Wikipedia, if you go on, even just like on BookTube, some people, their reviews are actually summaries, so you can watch that and, refresh your memory into what the book was about. Critical thinking is more about analysis and less about summarizing. Summarizing is a helpful skill, but the end result is not to get a summary. The end result is to get an analysis, right? So, when you're analyzing, one of my favorite things to do is look for keywords. The way that the words are used, and not just in regards to just symbols, but like when someone's addressing someone, how do they address them? If we look at child-parent relationships, do they call them mother, or do they use more colloquial mum or mama or ma? And what does that say about their relationship, right? If they call their mother mother, but they call their father dad or pops, probably their relationship is closer with their dad than with their mom, right? So, that says something about the relationship, those kind of words. I also like to look for connections to tangible things. And what I mean by tangible things are like other books or historical context. So making connections to things that are in real life, factual things. So if you connect, say, let's pick out a book, Sherlock Holmes, with an Edgar Allan Poe story, the Murders in the Rue Morgue or something like that, and connect them with like a Sherlock Holmes story and do the connections there, that's really what I'm talking about. And then personal connections, which I don't put a lot of emphasis on when I'm writing an essay or something, and really you shouldn't. Your essay should be more objective and stand back. But for your own personal growth, critical thinking skills, critical reading skills are very important. So they can definitely lead to a personal growth. Reading certain passages can affect the way you think about certain things. And this is one of the reasons that we should read more diversely, because you get more views, you get different views, and they break the walls of your echo chamber. I know a personal example for me is from one of my favorite comic books, Moonshadow. There's a quote in there that we learn to love God by loving those that we hate, which really took me a step back, and I was like, because I was really not liking a lot of people, and I'm thinking that's not who I want to be. I want to love God. So I got to learn to love these people that are not easy to love. And that was my own personal growth there. So I thought that was really cool, you know. And so you can come across these things in anything. You come across them in like classic literature, or you come across them in a comic book. It's all over the place, right? So it's pretty cool that way. So further into how to develop these skills. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my phone. I have my notes on here. It's just easier. So look at the types of books you're reading. And this is not to say, as I said before, that you can't apply critical reading skills to YA or to middle grade or to comic books, because as long as it's words on the page, you can read it critically. What this does mean is that if you read the same type of book, you're eventually going to stagnate. You're not going to develop in your critical reading skills, in your personal growth even, in my opinion. I think it's better to read a variety of genres, read from a variety of eras. I know that there's some people who don't read old books because there's new books, and there's people who don't read new books because there's old books. Read everything. Like, read everything. Read from authors of different sexualities and different races and from different places, and, you know, it's just will help you develop those skills so much more when you see different perspectives. And you can see the different trends as well. And it's beneficial actually to compare these trends. So if you're reading, you know, modern YA fantasy, try something from like the 80s fantasy as well, which is one of my favorite eras to read fantasy from, personally. And see how, you know, maybe that 80s fantasy influenced the newer writers these days. I think that's a great thing to do. Do close readings. And by this, I mean, slow down. I know that BookTube puts a lot of pressure on people to read a lot of books quickly. But if you are looking to develop critical reading skills, you gotta slow down. And the one way that I really like doing that, and the one way that I find really helps with critical reading, is to sub-vocalize. So sub-vocalizing is when you say the words fully in your head. And even sometimes I'll know, I missed a word. So I go back to the previous page and I reread it. Because I'm like, I missed the, and it's bugging me, so I have to go back and reread it. Because who knows, that word that you missed or skipped over or skim read could actually be very important, right? Another thing that helps with that is to tab your books. Let's see if there's a recent read here that I can pull out. Not off the... oh, here. So there's some tabs. There's not a lot. But every time I came across a passage that I want to look closer at, I tab it. And I could continue on with my reading and go back to that later. If it was something significant, I could go back and look at that later. What I also suggest doing is taking notes. Now you could do that in many ways. You could take notes as you're reading, or you can go back after you're done and take notes. And when I say take notes, I mean not just reactions to the text, but also your analysis and your thoughts about it. Another way I like to take notes, and I know I talked about summaries and they're not being critical thinking, but summaries can help with critical thinking because it helps you condense the text and get to the nitty-gritty of what it's really about. So what I like to do is at the end of chapters, if I'm doing critical reading, is write a summary of that chapter, just 1 to 2 sentences. So that also helps when you go to look back and you're looking for a specific passage. You can look at your chapter notes and be like, okay, that's in this chapter. But it also helps you actually narrow down what the whole point of that chapter was into those 1 to 2 sentences. That's a part of analysis because you're looking at it and making a judgment call on what is important and what is not important. And you could do small notes, just like a simple writing in the margin, or you could have sticky notes, or even have like a whole separate notebook just for the notes that you're taking about that. You can also make personal connections, as I said before. And one of the important notes, I think, to do, and maybe you could do this before reading, during reading, and after reading. If you're in the education system at all, you'd know that model before, after, and during, before, during, and after reading. But what I want you to do is identify your bias. Because no matter where we come from or what we can say or how diversely we read, we all have a certain bias when it comes to things. I know personally myself, I was raised in a white working class family, so I have that bias, that background, and I'm very liberal. I'm a Christian, so those are the biases that I'm coming in with. So if I'm confronting a text that is very conservative about like upper class people, I've got to know that my judgments, my biases are going to affect how I'm reading that book. And the same is true. If you come from a very wealthy upper class family and you're reading a book about, you know, a working class, you know, liberal family or a conservative family, again, you're going to have clashes there. So I think it's important to know what you're coming into a book with. And that works the reverse as well, is understanding the author's bias as well. Now we can make judgment calls on those biases. For example, H.P. Lovecraft, we all know that he was really quite racist, but know that going into the text, or know that after the text, kind of, you know, realize that, oh, this person thought about it this way, and that will affect how you read the book, because if you know that H.P. Lovecraft is really racist, then it will affect, you know, how he writes certain characters and how he thinks you're going to perceive them. So I think that's another important thing to note. And do your research. Use Wikipedia. Now I know a lot of teachers and everything poo-poo Wikipedia, and I'm going to talk further about this in another video, but if you're just doing it for yourself, Wikipedia is a great resource for looking up quick things in regards to authors and their biases and their personal lives and such like that. Yeah, so I also want to note that some of these skills only come with experience. You're not just going to go into your first book and be the perfect critical reader. You may have to read that book 3-4 times before you can, you know, really get your hands into it and you know, really apply your critical thinking skills and your reading skills and come up with a good analysis of that book. Some people who have been doing it for years can get it, you know, get a general idea on the first reading. I think everyone should read it twice if they really want to get in connection with the book, but that's just a personal opinion. But, you know, for me, I feel like I've been doing this for a long time. I have a degree in English. I have a degree to teach English, so, you know, I think I kind of know how to get, you know, that critical reading skills. I've been reading since I was like 2, so like for 30 years. So I feel like I'm pretty good at critical reading and getting it on the first or second time. But don't worry if you're not, just take your time. So I know there's a lot of pressure on BookTube to just read and read as much as you can and read all the stuff that someone else is reading, but part of the joy of reading for me and for a lot of people is being able to slow down and take a closer look at that text. Take a closer look at even just a poem. You can start off with something small, poems and short stories, something that won't take you a long time to read, you know, multiple times. Yeah, that's just what I have to say. I'm sorry this is rambly and all over the place, but yeah, those are my my knowledge that I'm trying to pass along about how to become a critical reader. If you have any other tips, because I know I'm not like an expert. I know I have a lot of experience. There's more people with different experience, different perspectives, different biases from me. So yeah, if you have any tips and tricks that you'd like to share, or any questions you'd like for me or another commenter to answer, go ahead and do that in the comments. And I look forward to talking to you there, and thank you for watching.